February 14, 1987. Valentine's Day in Butte, Montana. The night air bit with a cruel 12-degree air as Officer Thomas McKinnon's flashlight beam cut through the darkness on County Road 86. What he discovered would haunt the copper mining town for decades. A 1982 Ford Escort, engine humming against the silence. Driver's door hanging open, interior light casting an eerie glow across the empty driver's seat. The radio played soft love songs to no one. A single rose lay on the passenger seat, its red petals a stark contrast against the gray upholstery. A Valentine's gift that would never be delivered. Maya Wilson, 19 years old, had vanished into thin air. The keys dangled in the ignition. Her purse remained untouched on the floor. No signs of struggle. No footprints in the surrounding snow except for tire tracks leading to the shoulder of the road. It was as if she had simply disappeared. "I've never seen anything like it," McKinnon would later testify. It was like someone had just plucked her from the driver's seat. By morning, the entire town knew Maya Wilson's name. By the end of the week, her face was plastered across every telephone pole, store window, and newspaper in Montana. But no one came forward. No one had seen anything. Maya had just finished her shift at Rosie's diner, where regular customers described her as sunshine in human form. A sophomore at Montana Tech studying geology, a fitting choice in a town built on mining, Maya had her whole life mapped out. Friends called her reliable, punctual, cautious, not the type to leave her car running and disappear. For her mother, Patricia, February 14, 1987 marked the beginning of a 34-year nightmare. "They told me to prepare for the worst," she would later reveal in a tear-filled interview. But how do you prepare for not knowing? For never finding your child? The investigation quickly grew cold. Leads evaporated. Witnesses fell silent. And as winter turned to spring, then summer, then fall, Maya Wilson became just another missing person statistic. But some cases refused to stay buried. In 2021, 34 years after Maya's disappearance, a breakthrough would send shockwaves through Montana. Using technology that didn't exist when Maya vanished, investigators would finally uncover the truth. And the identity of the killer would leave the community reeling. The person responsible hadn't fled to another state or country. They hadn't been hiding in the shadows. They had been hiding in plain sight for 34 years. A trusted figure. A pillar of the community. Someone no one would ever suspect. If you're fascinated by cold cases finally solved through modern technology, hit subscribe now and turn on notifications. This is just one of many forgotten crimes we're bringing back into the light here on Revealed Crime Cases. February 14, 1987 began like any other day for Maya Wilson. She woke up early in the small two-bedroom apartment she shared with her roommate, Tanya Delgado, on the west side of Butte. According to Tanya's later statements, Maya seemed excited about the evening ahead. She had a date with her boyfriend, Jake, Tanya told investigators. It wasn't anything fancy. They were just going to watch movies at his place after her shift, but she was looking forward to it. Maya had worked at Rosie's diner for almost 2 years. The 24-hour establishment sat on the main strip of Butte, its neon sign a beacon for truckers, miners coming off shift, and locals craving the best apple pie in 3 counties. At 19, Maya was one of the youngest servers but had quickly become a customer favorite. She remembered everyone's order, said Rosie Callahan, the diner's owner. If you came in twice, she knew your name by the 3rd visit. That kind of thing makes people feel special. Security footage, grainy by today's standards, showed Maya arriving for her shift at 2:58 p.m., 2 minutes early as usual. She wore jeans, snow boots, and a red sweater, a nod to Valentine's Day. Her dark hair was pulled back in a practical ponytail. The afternoon passed uneventfully. The diner was busy with couples celebrating the holiday early, and Maya moved efficiently between tables. Co-workers noted nothing unusual about her behavior. At 7:42 p.m., Maya served her last table, an elderly couple who'd been coming to the diner every Valentine's Day for 40 years. At 8:01 p.m., she clocked out, collected her tips, and waved goodbye to her co-workers. "Drive safe," were the last words Rosie spoke to her. "The roads are icy tonight." Maya's boyfriend, Jake Peterson, was expecting her around 8:30 p.m. His apartment was a 15-minute drive from the diner in good weather, slightly longer on icy roads. He'd prepared what he later described as a budget Valentine surprise: microwave popcorn, rental movies, and a single rose he'd splurged on, despite his student budget. At 8:35 p.m., when Maya hadn't arrived, Jake called the diner. They confirmed she'd left over half an hour earlier. He wasn't immediately concerned. The roads were bad, and she might have stopped for gas. By 9:15 p.m., with no sign of Maya and no answer on her pager, Jake called Tanya, who hadn't seen her either. By 10 p.m., he called the police. Officer Thomas McKinnon was finishing his shift when the call came in. He almost passed it to the next officer, but decided to take one final drive down County Road 86, a shortcut Maya sometimes used between the diner and Jake's apartment. What he found at 10:37 p.m. would become the centerpiece of Montana's most baffling disappearance. The car was just sitting there, McKinnon recalled in a 2019 documentary. Engine running, lights on, door open. I approached with my hand on my weapon, thinking it might be a trap or ambush. But there was no one, just this empty car with Valentine's music playing. The scene was eerie in its ordinariness. No blood, no signs of violence or struggle. Maya's purse sat on the floor with $43 in tips inside. Her wallet contained her ID and bank cards. Nothing appeared stolen. The only unusual element was the single rose on the passenger seat, identical to the one Jake had waiting at his apartment. Its presence would confuse investigators for years. Had Maya purchased it herself? Had someone given it to her? Was it a lure? By midnight, the area around County Road 86 buzzed with activity. Police cordoned off a half-mile stretch of road. Search dogs were brought in but lost Maya's scent at the edge of the road, as if she'd been picked up by a vehicle. By morning, volunteers from across Butte gathered to search the surrounding woods and fields. The Valentine's Day disappearance of a popular local teenager galvanized the community. Over 300 people joined search parties that first weekend. "I remember how cold it was," said Robert Fleming, who helped organize civilian search efforts. "Below zero, snow up to your knees in places, but people kept coming. Everyone knew Maya from the diner. Everyone wanted to find her." As days passed with no sign of Maya, the search widened. Divers checked nearby Harrison Reservoir despite its frozen surface. Abandoned mines, of which Butte had hundreds, were explored by specialized teams. Posters with Maya's smiling face appeared across 5 counties. Patricia Wilson, Maya's mother, became a fixture on local news. "Someone knows something," she repeated in interview after interview, dark circles forming under her eyes as sleep became a memory. "Please, if you saw anything that night, come forward." The community rallied around the Wilson family. Rosie's Diner established a reward fund that quickly grew to $15,000. Maya's fellow students at Montana Tech organized candlelight vigils. Local businesses donated supplies to search teams. But as February turned to March, hope began to dim. The search parties grew smaller, the news coverage waned, and the terrible reality set in. Maya Wilson might never be found. Where are you watching from? Let me know in the comments. Sometimes these cases resonate differently depending on where you live, especially if you're familiar with small towns, where everyone knows everyone and the impossible seems like it just couldn't happen, until it does. The Butte Police Department of 1987 wasn't equipped for a case like Maya's disappearance. With a force of just 28 officers serving a population of 34,000, they typically handled bar fights, domestic disputes, and petty theft. The last major missing persons case had been in 1974, and that had been solved when the missing teenager returned home after a weekend with friends. This inexperience would prove catastrophic for the Wilson investigation. "The first 48 hours of any missing persons case are critical," explained former FBI agent Carolyn Dyer, who reviewed the case in 2010. In Maya's case, those hours were squandered with basic procedural errors that compromised the entire investigation. The first mistake came at the crime scene itself. Officer McKinnon, finding Maya's car, called for backup but then made a fateful decision. He reached into the vehicle to turn off the engine, contaminating potential fingerprint evidence and disturbing the scene. It was freezing, and I was worried about the car running out of gas, McKinnon later explained. I wasn't thinking about fingerprints or trace evidence. We weren't trained for that kind of thing back then. By morning, when crime scene specialists arrived from Helena, at least 17 people had walked around the vehicle, including 4 officers, 2 tow truck operators, Jake Peterson, and Patricia Wilson, who'd been allowed to look inside for any clues to her daughter's whereabouts. The rose found on the passenger seat, potentially crucial evidence, was handed to Patricia as a courtesy and not collected until 3 days later, by which time any DNA evidence had been compromised. Weather complicated matters further. A snowstorm hit Butte on February 16th, covering the area with 8 inches of fresh powder and obliterating any remaining tracks or evidence around the scene. The investigation's next major failure involved witness statements. At least 3 drivers reported seeing a vehicle parked behind Maya's Ford Escort between 8:15 and 8:30 p.m. One described it as a dark pickup truck, another as a large American car, possibly a Cadillac, and the third as something big, maybe a van. Rather than treating these as potentially different vehicles or multiple witnesses to the same vehicle, Detective Russell Harmond, the lead investigator, dismissed the conflicting statements as unreliable and focused instead on Maya's personal life. They went straight to the boyfriend, Jake Peterson recalled in a 2018 interview. I must have been interrogated 6 times that first week. Meanwhile, whoever took Maya was getting away. Peterson passed a polygraph test on February 18th, but detectives continued focusing on him for months, obtaining multiple search warrants for his apartment and vehicle. This tunnel vision diverted resources from other leads. Perhaps the most damaging error involved a critical piece of physical evidence. On February 20th, a highway maintenance worker found a woman's scarf approximately half a mile from where Maya's car had been discovered. The blue wool scarf matched the description of one Maya had been wearing when she left work. The scarf was logged into evidence but then inexplicably marked unrelated and stored in a general property room rather than with case evidence. It wasn't until 1992, during a case review, that anyone realized the scarf had never been tested for DNA. By then, improper storage had degraded any biological material it might have contained. That scarf could have broken the case wide open, said Detective Martha Kowalski, who joined the investigation in 1990. Instead, it sat in a box for 5 years. That kind of mistake is unforgivable. The mishandling extended to potential suspects as well. On March 3, 1987, an anonymous caller reported seeing a man washing out the back of his truck obsessively at a self-service car wash around midnight on Valentine's Day. The caller provided a partial license plate. Records show the lead was assigned to Officer Paul Danner, who was simultaneously handling 3 domestic violence cases and a series of business break-ins. The partial plate was never fully investigated, and no follow-up with the anonymous caller was documented. Similarly, a gas station attendant who reported a nervous-looking man buying bleach and trash bags late on February 14th was interviewed once but never shown photos of potential suspects or asked to work with a sketch artist. By summer 1987, the active investigation was already losing steam. The case file, later found to be disorganized and incomplete, showed gaps in the investigative timeline. Weeks passed between witness interviews. Follow-ups were promised but never conducted. Montana State Police offered assistance in April, but interdepartmental politics led local authorities to decline. The FBI, constrained by jurisdiction limitations, couldn't intervene without evidence of a kidnapping across state lines. It was a perfect storm of incompetence, bad luck, and jurisdictional jealousy, said true crime author Michael Broderick, who spent 3 years researching the case, and Maya Wilson paid the price. Perhaps most tragically, in October 1987, a major lead emerged only to be fumbled. A woman named Diana Harris contacted police claiming her ex-husband had come home late on Valentine's Day, with unexplained scratches on his face and acting strange. She reported he'd burned a set of clothes the next day. Detective Harmon, skeptical of what he viewed as a vindictive ex-wife, conducted a cursory interview with the man, accepted his explanation about an accident at work, and closed the lead without collecting DNA or searching the property. By the one-year anniversary of Maya's disappearance, the case had grown cold. The original case files were boxed and moved to storage. The designated tip line was disconnected. Maya Wilson became, in police terminology, an inactive missing persons case. For Patricia Wilson, watching the investigation falter was another trauma on top of losing her daughter. They gave up, she told reporters in 1988. They made mistakes, and then they gave up. What no one realized then was that the truth about Maya's fate was hiding in plain sight, and would remain hidden for another 33 years. When the official investigation faltered, Patricia Wilson refused to let her daughter be forgotten. A middle school math teacher with no background in criminal investigation, Patricia transformed her grief into purpose with a singular focus: find Maya, or find the truth. The police told me to try to move on after just 6 months, Patricia recalled in a rare 2015 interview. Move on? From my child? That was never an option. By the summer of 1987, Patricia had taken a leave of absence from teaching. By fall, she had resigned altogether. Her modest ranch-style home on Granite Street underwent a transformation as dramatic as her own. The basement, once a casual family room with a TV and sofa, became what locals would eventually call the Wilson War Room. Patricia converted the 600-square-foot space into a meticulous investigation center that would have impressed seasoned detectives. Along the east wall, she constructed a massive timeline. Starting with February 14, 1987, it eventually stretched to cover decades, with color-coded pins and index cards marking every lead, interview, and potential connection. Red string connected related events. Yellow sticky notes highlighted inconsistencies in witness statements. The north wall became a map of Butte and surrounding Silverbow County. Patricia had marked every location connected to the case: the diner, Maya's route home, where her car was found, and areas searched. As years passed, this map expanded to include properties owned by persons of interest and locations of similar unsolved cases throughout Montana. She approached it like a mathematician, said Robert Fleming, who remained a supporter through the years. She saw patterns where others saw coincidences. She tracked variables and constants. She applied logic to chaos. Patricia's methods were remarkably thorough. She maintained 3-ring binders for each potential suspect, eventually accumulating 42 volumes. She recorded license plates of unfamiliar cars that drove past her house too often. She attended police academy community classes to learn investigative techniques. By 1990, she had personally interviewed 187 people connected to Maya: friends, co-workers, customers from the diner, Maya's professors, and even casual acquaintances. She recorded these conversations with permission, transcribed them by hand, and analyzed them for inconsistencies. The toll was enormous. Patricia's marriage to Maya's father ended in 1989. Friends gradually stopped calling as her single-minded focus left room for little else. Her savings dwindled as she spent thousands on private investigators who produced no results. I remember visiting her in 1994, said Maya's cousin Andrea. She hadn't changed a thing in Maya's room, it was frozen in time. But Patricia herself had changed completely. She'd aged 20 years in 7. She lived on coffee and determination. As technology evolved, so did Patricia's methods. She taught herself to use the internet in the mid-90s, joining early online communities of families with missing loved ones. By 2000, she had created a website about Maya's case that attracted tips from across the country. When social media emerged, Patricia embraced it with the same intensity. The Find Maya Wilson Facebook page she launched in 2008 gained over 40,000 followers. She used it to share updates, press for information, and keep Maya's story alive in public consciousness. Every February 14th, Patricia held a candlelight vigil at the spot where Maya's car had been found. In the early years, hundreds attended. By the 30th anniversary in 2017, the crowd had dwindled to dozens, but Patricia's resolve never wavered. Some people called it obsession, Patricia said. I called it motherhood. You don't stop looking for your child, ever. Her persistence kept pressure on law enforcement. Every time a new detective or sheriff took office in Silver Bow County, Patricia would arrive with a meticulously prepared briefing binder about Maya's case. Some humored her. Others were genuinely impressed by her research. Throughout 3 decades of searching, Patricia weathered false leads, cruel hoaxes, and the well-meaning but painful suggestions that she should find closure. She refused all of these. Closure is for people who know what happened, she often said. I never wanted closure. I wanted answers. In 2021, Patricia Wilson would finally get those answers, and they would shake the foundation of everything she thought she knew about her daughter's disappearance. Only a small percentage of viewers are subscribed to our channel. If you're enjoying this video and want more true crime stories like Maya's, please join our community by hitting subscribe and turning on notifications. What would you do if someone you loved vanished without a trace? Would you ever give up searching? Let me know in the comments below. As the 1990s dawned, Maya Wilson's disappearance gradually receded from Butte's collective consciousness. The vibrant teenager who vanished on Valentine's Day became a local legend, a cautionary tale parents told their daughters about being careful after dark. For law enforcement, Maya's case joined dozens of others in the dreaded cold case filing cabinet. The original investigators moved on, some to different departments, others to retirement. New detectives brought fresh eyes, but faced the same deteriorating evidence and fading memories. In 1992, the 5-year anniversary prompted a feature in the Montana Standard newspaper. The renewed attention generated 17 tips to the police hotline, briefly rekindled for the occasion. Each lead was investigated, each led nowhere. It was like chasing ghosts, said Detective Harold Weaver, who reviewed the case in 1992. Too much time had passed, memories had changed, evidence had degraded, we were always a day late and $1 short. The case briefly resurfaced in 1997 when America's Most Wanted featured a segment on Montana cold cases. The national exposure brought an influx of calls, most well-meaning but unhelpful, some from psychics claiming visions of Maya's fate, and a few from attention seekers falsely confessing. By the turn of the millennium, the case had been officially reviewed 3 times, with each review concluding the same way. Insufficient evidence to proceed. The file grew thicker with reports but no closer to resolution. The 2000s brought new forensic techniques that offered a glimmer of hope. In 2003, items from Maya's car were retested for DNA using technology unavailable in 1987. Results were disappointing. Decades of improper storage had compromised most biological evidence. In 2007, a true crime podcast called Big Sky Secrets devoted 3 episodes to Maya's disappearance. The series prompted renewed interest and a tantalizing lead. An anonymous caller claimed to know who was responsible, but refused to speak with police, citing fear for their safety. Producer Samantha Novak arranged an interview with the reluctant witness, but fate intervened in a tragic twist. 2 days before the scheduled meeting, 73-year-old Harold Jenkins, a former mechanic with a garage near Rosie's diner, suffered a fatal heart attack in his home. Only after his death did Jenkins' daughter discover a sealed envelope in his desk labeled, "Maya, open if anything happens to me." Inside was a handwritten statement describing a dark pickup truck Jenkins had serviced regularly in the 1980s. The owner had brought it in the day after Valentine's Day, 1987, insisting on cleaning the interior himself while Jenkins worked on the transmission. He was acting strange, Jenkins had written, nervous-like. I saw something in the back that looked like it could have been blood, but I didn't say nothing. He was the kind of man you didn't question. The statement didn't name the truck's owner, but provided a detailed description matching someone connected to the case. Jenkins had kept this information secret for 20 years, out of what his daughter called old-fashioned fear. By the time police received Jenkins' statement, the truck was long gone, likely crushed in a scrapyard or rusting in a ravine. Another promising lead dissolved into the fog of time. The silence around Maya's case would persist until 2021, when science would finally succeed where human memory and courage had failed. For 34 years, Maya Wilson's case languished in filing cabinets and evidence storage rooms. The physical evidence, what little remained properly preserved, seemed destined to hold its secrets forever. But science moves forward, even when investigations stall. In January 2021, a new cold case unit formed in Montana's Division of Criminal Investigation. Their mandate: review unsolved disappearances and murders using the latest forensic technologies. Maya's case was among the first 5 selected. "We chose Maya's case for 2 reasons," explained Dr. Rebecca Fontaine, the unit's forensic director. "First, the high public interest that never faded. Second, we had a DNA sample that, against all odds, had survived. That sample, microscopic but potentially revelatory, came from an unlikely source. In 1987, investigators had collected scrapings from beneath Maya's car door handle. Standard procedure, even then. These scrapings, containing skin cells from someone who had touched the door, had been properly sealed and, by sheer luck, stored in a climate-controlled evidence locker instead of the damper main storage facility where much of the case evidence deteriorated. For decades, this DNA sample had been useless. Initial testing in 1987 could only determine blood type. Later tests in the 1990s and early 2000s confirmed it belonged to a male not matching any suspect in the database but couldn't identify him. But by 2021, forensic science had undergone a revolution, spearheaded by a technique that had captured headlines by catching the Golden State Killer in 2018, investigative genetic genealogy. Traditional DNA matching requires the suspect's DNA to be in a law enforcement database, Dr. Fontaine explained. Genetic genealogy doesn't. It can find suspects through their relatives, even distant cousins they've never met. The process began with the extraction of the preserved DNA sample, now barely visible to the naked eye after multiple previous tests had consumed portions of it. Using advanced amplification techniques, lab technicians were able to develop what geneticists call a DNA profile, essentially a genetic fingerprint. But instead of uploading this profile to CODIS, the FBI's combined DNA index system, as would be standard procedure, investigators took a different approach. They sent the profile to a specialized lab that converted it into the type of data used by consumer genealogy companies. "It's like translating between languages," said genetic genealogist Martha Kowalski, who worked on the case. Law enforcement DNA tests look at one set of markers. Consumer tests like 23andMe or Ancestry look at different ones. We needed to translate our crime scene DNA into the consumer format. With this translated profile, investigators received court approval to upload the DNA to GEDmatch, a public genealogy database where users can opt in to law enforcement searches. Within hours, they had their first break. Multiple distant matches. "We found about 20 people sharing enough DNA with our unknown subject to be 3rd or 4th cousins," Kowalski explained. "None were close relatives, but collectively they created a map we could follow." What followed was painstaking genealogical research. The team built family trees for each DNA match, working backward in time to find common ancestors, then forward again to identify all descendants. "It's like solving 20 puzzles simultaneously," Kowalski said. "We're looking for the place where all these family trees intersect, the common relative connecting all these distant cousins." After 3 months of intensive research, the team had constructed sprawling family trees containing over 3,000 individuals across 6 generations. They narrowed their focus to families that had lived in or near Butte during the 1980s, reducing their pool to 140 potential suspects. Public records narrowed the field further. They eliminated women. The DNA was male. Men who were too young or too old in 1987, and those with verified alibis for Valentine's Day night. This left 22 men. Investigators began the delicate process of elimination through contemporary records, social media, and discreet interviews with neighbors and acquaintances. They looked for connections to Maya, Rosie's Diner, or County Road 86. On April 17, 2021, the breakthrough came from an unexpected direction. While reviewing old newspapers for mentions of potential suspects, researcher Damon Reynolds discovered a photograph from 1986. It showed crossing guard Frank Rollins receiving a Community Hero Award for 20 years of service, helping children safely cross the street near Washington Elementary School. In the background of the photo, barely visible but unmistakable, Rosie's Diner. Frank Rollins wasn't on our radar initially, admitted Detective Sarah Kincaid, who led the investigation. He had no criminal record. His name never appeared in the original case files, but that photo placed him right across from where Maya worked. Further research revealed Rollins lived just 2 blocks from Maya's 1987 apartment. His route home would take him along County Road 86. Most significantly, he had been 39 years old when Maya disappeared, fitting the age range indicated by witness statements about the mysterious truck driver. The team quietly obtained a warrant for surveillance. For 2 weeks, they monitored Rollins, now 73 and retired, but still living in Butte. They collected a discarded coffee cup from a cafe he frequented, a standard technique for obtaining DNA without alerting a suspect. The lab results came back in just 18 hours. The DNA from the coffee cup matched the sample from Maya's car door with 99.9998% certainty. That moment, when the lab called with the results, "I'll never forget it," said Detective Kincaid. 34 years of mystery solved with a coffee cup and science that didn't exist when Maya disappeared. On May 2, 2021, police arrested Frank Rollins at his home. The friendly crossing guard who had safely shepherded generations of Butte's children across busy streets was finally revealed as the predator who had taken Maya Wilson's life. If you're finding this story valuable and want more people to learn about how modern science is solving decades-old cases, give this video a thumbs up to help others discover it. Your engagement helps these stories reach a wider audience. What time is it where you're watching from? I'm curious to know which part of the world is following Maya's story right now. Let me know in the comments below. Frank Rollins was the last person anyone in Butte would have suspected of murder. For 34 years, he had lived and worked among the townspeople, building a reputation as one of the community's most beloved figures. Mr. Frank, as generations of children called him, had been the crossing guard at Washington Elementary since 1966. Each morning and afternoon, rain or shine, he stood at the corner of Continental Drive and Platinum Street, ensuring students crossed safely. He knew every child's name, remembered their birthdays, and handed out candy canes each December. He was like the town grandfather, said Eleanor Weathers, principal at Washington Elementary, from 1998 to 2015. Parents trusted him completely. He was invited to graduation parties, weddings. He was part of these children's lives from kindergarten through adulthood. Rollins' community involvement extended beyond his crossing guard duties. He volunteered at the annual Miners' Day Parade, helped organize the community Easter egg hunt, and served as a deacon at First Baptist Church for over 2 decades. His modest home on Granite Street, just 7 blocks from Patricia Wilson's, was immaculately maintained, with award-winning flower beds that earned recognition in the local paper 3 years running. Frank was who we all aspired to be in our retirement, said neighbor Thomas Blackwood. Active, involved, respected. He never missed a day at his post, even in blizzards. Kids counted on him. What no one knew was that beneath this carefully constructed facade lived a predator who had committed a calculated murder, and then watched for decades as the community searched for answers he alone possessed. The arrest of the 73-year-old Rollins on May 2, 2021, sent seismic shocks through Butte. News spread rapidly, first through urgent texts and calls, then via social media, and finally through special bulletins on local television. "I thought it was a mistake," recalled Jennifer Barnes, who had crossed the street under Rollins's protection throughout elementary school in the 1990s. "It felt like finding out Santa Claus was a serial killer. It just couldn't be real." But the evidence against Rollins proved overwhelming. Beyond the DNA match from Maya's car door, investigators uncovered a damning trail once they knew where to look. A search of Rollins' home revealed a hidden crawl space beneath his garage, accessible through a trapdoor concealed under a workbench. Inside, police discovered a box containing items that could only have belonged to Maya: her missing wristwatch, student ID card, and a distinctive turquoise ring given to her by her grandmother. These were trophy items, explained forensic psychologist Dr. Malcolm Reed. Keeping them was a way for Rollins to revisit and relive his crime. It's textbook predatory behavior. Rollins' work record showed he had called in sick on February 15, 1987, the day after Maya's disappearance, breaking his perfect attendance record. Neighbors recalled his truck being washed repeatedly that weekend despite freezing temperatures. Most disturbingly, investigators found a journal hidden inside a hollowed-out book in Rollins's basement. The journal, spanning decades, contained entries detailing his obsession with young women who matched Maya's description. He had apparently stalked Maya for weeks before her disappearance, noting her schedule at Rosie's diner and tracking her movements. He knew exactly when she would be driving home that night, said Detective Kincaid. The journal makes clear this wasn't random. He chose her, studied her, and waited for the perfect opportunity. When confronted with the evidence, Rollins initially maintained his innocence. But as investigators methodically laid out the case against him, the DNA, the trophies, the journal, his facade crumbled. In a 10-hour interrogation, he finally confessed to killing Maya Wilson. According to his confession, Rollins had used his truck to force Maya's car to the shoulder of County Road 86. Posing as a good Samaritan offering help with what he claimed was a flat tire, he approached her vehicle. When Maya stepped out to look, Rollins overpowered her and forced her into his truck. What happened next was too horrific to detail here. Suffice to say, Maya's final moments were terrifying, and the location of her remains, which Rollins eventually revealed, was a remote mining shaft outside of town that had since been sealed and built over. For the community of Butte, Rollins' arrest and confession triggered a complex wave of emotions. Relief at finally knowing the truth mingled with horror that the killer had been among them all along, watching search parties and attending vigils for his own victim. He came to the 20th anniversary memorial, Patricia Wilson said, her voice hollow with disbelief. He stood next to me, holding a candle, while I spoke about never giving up hope of finding who took my daughter. And he just stood there. The betrayal cut especially deep for those who had entrusted their children to Rollins' care. Parents struggled to reconcile the kindly crossing guard with the monster revealed in his confession. Many sought counseling for their now adult children, who grappled with memories of high fives and friendly waves from hands that had taken a young woman's life. I can't stop thinking about how many times my daughter held his hand across the street, said Michael Donovan, whose children attended Washington Elementary in the early 2000s. How many thousands of children did the same? We invited evil into our lives and never knew it. For law enforcement, the case exemplified how predators hide in plain sight. Rollins created the perfect cover, said FBI behavioral analyst Regina Torres, who consulted on the case. Who suspects the beloved crossing guard? He built a life designed to place him above suspicion while giving him access to the community. It was deliberate and calculated. As news of Rollins's arrest spread beyond Montana, national media descended on Butte. The story of the crossing guard who harbored a deadly secret for 3 decades captured America's imagination and fear. It forced uncomfortable questions about how well we really know those we trust most in our communities. On September 14, 2021, Frank Rollins appeared in Silverbow County Courthouse to face justice for a crime committed 34 years earlier. The once respected crossing guard, now revealed as a calculated killer, had aged dramatically in the 4 months since his arrest. His attorney initially planned an insanity defense but abandoned it after psychiatric evaluations found Rollins fully competent. Facing overwhelming evidence, Rollins accepted a plea deal, guilty to first-degree murder in exchange for revealing the location of Maya's remains. The judge sentenced him to life without possibility of parole, the maximum penalty available since Montana had no death penalty when Maya was killed. No punishment can truly fit this crime, Judge Mary Ann Simmons stated during sentencing. Mr. Rollins not only took Maya Wilson's life, but stole 34 years of truth from her family and this community. He watched their suffering with indifference while accepting their trust and respect. For Patricia Wilson, the sentencing brought the culmination of her life's mission. Now 73, the same age as her daughter's killer, she attended every court proceeding, sitting stoically as the horrific details of Maya's final moments were revealed. When given the opportunity to address the court, Patricia approached the podium with the quiet dignity that had sustained her through decades of uncertainty. "I've waited 12,419 days to face the man who took my daughter," she began, her voice steady, despite the tears streaming down her face. "I filled my basement with evidence boards and binders because I couldn't fill it with grandchildren Maya might have given me. I lost my marriage, many friendships, and countless nights of sleep. But I never lost hope that this day would come." She looked directly at Rollins, who kept his eyes downcast throughout her statement. "I don't forgive you, I never will. But after 34 years of questions, I can finally answer the most important one when people ask about Maya. I know what happened to my daughter." In October 2021, following Rollins's directions, authorities recovered Maya's remains from a sealed mine shaft outside Butte. After forensic examination confirmed her identity, Patricia finally held a proper funeral, attended by over 800 community members, on what would have been Maya's 54th birthday. The Wilson case has since become a landmark in forensic science, highlighting how technological advances can solve cases once considered unsolvable. Cold case units across the country have adopted the methodology used in Butte, leading to dozens of similar breakthroughs. The investigation also prompted important changes in evidence preservation protocols. Montana now requires all biological evidence in unsolved cases to be stored in climate-controlled facilities and periodically evaluated for testing with newer technologies. For Patricia Wilson, justice arrived late but undeniably. She sold her house, investigation center and all, and established the Maya Wilson Foundation, which funds genetic genealogy testing for other cold cases. The foundation has already helped solve 3 long-dormant investigations. Maya's legacy isn't just her death, Patricia told reporters at the foundation launch. It's every case solved because of what we learned from hers. It's every family that gets answers because she didn't get justice quickly enough. For more true crime stories like this, subscribe to Revealed Crime Cases and share this video with anyone interested in true crime. Your support helps us continue bringing these important stories to light. How do you feel about cases solved through genetic genealogy? Is it a miracle of science or potentially problematic? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below.